Nobody here respects you, Nora. Look at you, trembling like a ghost while your sister stands on that stage building an empire. You are a complete, worthless disgrace to this family. My mother, Eleanor's sharp, toxic voice shattered the warm air of the overcrowded country club ballroom, and over 100 heads snapped directly toward me. I stood near the heavy oak entrance in my plain navy dress, my left hand leaning heavily on a polished wooden cane to relieve the deep, burning ache in my right hip, while my right hand tightly clutched an old, heavy brass desk key deep inside my coat pocket. I was Captain Nora Vance, a former Marine Corps logistics and intelligence officer who had spent 6 years managing high-risk supply lines through active combat zones in Fallujah and Helmand Province. My younger sister, Clara, stood under the bright center stage spotlights next to my mother, wearing a $3,000 silk designer dress beside a massive campaign banner reading Clara Vance, President of the Vance Foundation for Wounded Heroes. "Mom, please," I said, keeping my voice low and disciplined despite the ice filling my chest. "You called me an hour ago and said your dad's medical condition had crashed, that he was calling for me on his deathbed." "I lied to get you here," Eleanor cut in, stepping up to the microphone as the crowd gasped softly. "I wanted everyone in this city to see what a selfish parasite looks like. Your sister raised $2 million tonight to build a private trauma rehabilitation center for wounded Marines. Meanwhile, you took early retirement, vanished into a small farmhouse, and haven't given a single dime to support this family." Clara stepped forward, taking the microphone from my mother and putting on a gentle, sorrowful expression that made my stomach turn. "It's okay, Mom," Clara said into the sound system, her voice echoing softly off the high marble ceilings. "Nora has always struggled with jealousy and operational confusion. While I was working 80 hours a week building this charity from scratch, Nora was sitting in air-conditioned offices overseas doing paperwork. We can't all be heroes." A cold, quiet ripple of murmurs filled the room. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns shook their heads at me in disgust. A local news cameraman turned his lens toward my cane, zooming in on my pale, exhausted face. My mother raised her hand, motioning to 2 heavy-set security guards near the door. "Security, escort this woman out. She's disturbing our donors." But before the guards could take 2 steps toward me, a tall, impeccably groomed man in a pristine Marine Corps dress blue uniform slowly rose from the front row VIP table across the ballroom. The room fell dead silent as decorated Marine Staff Sergeant Miller adjusted his white cover, locked his eyes directly onto me from across the crowd, snapped his boots together with a sharp crack, and raised his right hand in a rigid, crisp, and unwavering military salute. My mother's smirk froze instantly. Her raised hand dropped mid-air as she stared at the decorated soldier in utter confusion. "Sergeant Miller?" Eleanor stuttered into the microphone, her polished voice wavering for the first time. "Why are you saluting her? She's just an unemployed former clerk." Sergeant Miller didn't look at my mother. His arm remained locked in the air, his eyes unblinking, his voice carrying like a thunderclap across the silent ballroom. "Because, Mrs. Vance, you are speaking to the logistics officer who personally ran a 4-vehicle convoy through an active ambush to pull my burning Humvee out of a ditch in Fallujah, while your other daughter was 3 states away committing federal fraud." A collective, horrified gasp ripped through the audience. Guests leaned forward, whispering frantically as Clara's face drained of every single drop of color. "What are you talking about?" Clara snapped, her voice losing its gentle tone as she gripped the edges of the podium until her knuckles turned white. Before the guards could move, my encrypted military phone vibrated violently against my palm. A priority red alert flashed across the screen from the Department of Defense Inspector General's portal. Subject line, subpoena executed, Operation Dispassionate Audit. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice. I took 3 slow, deliberate steps forward without relying on my cane, tapped my phone screen, and authorized an encrypted wireless data transfer directly into the venue's main media projector. 5 seconds later, the massive digital screen displaying Clara's glowing campaign photo flickered twice, went pitch black, and reopened to display an official, classified federal audit document stamped with bold red security seals.
6 years ago, I said, my voice quiet, clear, and cutting through the silence like a scalpel. My father suffered a massive stroke. My mother told me the family was bankrupt, that my father's medical bills were $20,000 a month, and that if I didn't sign over my military power of attorney to Clara, Dad would be placed in a state facility to die. "Don't listen to her," Eleanor screamed, her voice cracking as she rushed to the edge of the stage. "She's mentally unstable. She has severe combat trauma. She's making this up." "I signed the military power of attorney," I continued, ignoring my mother completely as the crowd watched the screens in absolute horror. "I signed the military power of attorney, and for 6 straight years, $15,000 a month was automatically debited from my military combat disability pay, my officer housing allowance, and my VA medical trust. I lived in an unheated farmhouse, eating canned food, believing every cent was keeping my father alive, in a private medical suite in our home. It was!" Eleanor shouted, her hands shaking violently as she pointed an icy finger at me. "Every single penny went to your father's doctors." "Then why?" Staff Sergeant Miller spoke up, stepping out from his table and opening a heavy black leather folder on the nearest linen tablecloth. "Does the official Department of Veterans Affairs National Registry show that Colonel David Vance passed away 5 years ago in a federal hospice facility in Oregon?" The room went so cold and quiet, you could hear the heavy rain beating against the stained glass windows outside. My mother froze as if she had been struck by lightning. Her jaw dropped open, but no sound came out. "You lied to me for 5 years, Mom. You kept telling me Dad was in the next room sleeping. You sent me fake monthly update letters signed with his shaky handwriting. You kept his death a secret so you and Clara could draw $90,000 a year from my combat casualty checks." "Nora," Clara stammered, her hands trembling so hard she dropped her microphone, sending a deafening screech of feedback through the room. "Nora, listen to me. It was Mom's idea. Mom said you were deployed overseas and wouldn't care about the money anyway." "That's a lie," Eleanor screamed, spinning around and grabbing Clara's silk sleeve so hard the fabric tore. "You were the one who wanted the condo in Miami. You forced me to keep signing his name on the bank transfers." "I didn't buy a condo," Clara screamed back, shoving our mother's hands off her with pure venom. "You used her pension to pay off your private gambling debts at the casino." The entire room of high society donors watched in absolute disgust as the 2 women tore into each other on stage like starved animals, destroying the polished facade they had built over 6 years of deception. Suddenly, a quiet chime echoed from the media console. The screen behind them shifted again. An audio player opened automatically. It was a wiretapped phone call recorded 3 days ago by federal investigators, a conversation between my mother and Clara. Eleanor's recorded voice. "If the VA inspectors ask why David's pension is still active, tell them Nora manages the bank portal. She has medical records showing brain trauma. The prosecutors will think she made a mistake." Clara's recorded voice. "What if Nora comes to the gala?" Eleanor's recorded voice. "Let her come. I'll humiliate her in front of the press before she can open her mouth. Nobody believes a broken veteran over a successful charity president." The recorded voices faded into a sickening silence. Clara fell to her knees on the stage floor, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably as the local news cameras captured every single frame of her downfall. Eleanor stumbled backward until her spine hit the wooden display board, her aristocratic poise completely destroyed, her eyes wide with frantic, ugly terror. The heavy double doors at the back of the hall slammed open once more. 4 uniformed federal marshals and 2 senior special agents from the Department of Veterans Affairs Criminal Investigative Service strode into the room, their heavy tactical boots thudding against the carpeted floor. The lead investigator, a stern woman with a steel-gray ponytail, didn't hesitate for a second. She walked past the rows of stunned, silent donors, stepped straight up onto the stage, and pulled 2 sets of heavy steel handcuffs from her tactical belt. Eleanor Vance, Clara Vance, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, multi-year pension theft, identity forgery, and falsification of military documents. You can't do this to us, Eleanor screamed, struggling wildly as a female marshal seized her wrists, the cold, sharp click-click of the handcuffs locking into place. We are prominent citizens. My daughter runs a charity for wounded soldiers. Your charity, the special agent replied with cold precision, was flagged 3 weeks ago when Captain Vance walked into the Regional Inspector General's office with the original, unedited home banking ledgers. Ledgers she recovered from her late father's desk using his master key. I reached into my pocket, holding up the heavy brass desk key I had kept hidden since the day I returned home. It was the key my father had secretly mailed to my military base 2 weeks before he died, containing the exact location of the hidden safe my mother had tried to burn. Clara sobbed hysterically as the second marshal clipped cuffs around her wrists, pulling her up from the floor. "Nora, please," Clara begged, her eyes wide with desperate panic as she was led down the stage steps toward the aisle. "Tell them to stop. We're your family. You can't let them take your own sister to prison." I stood straight, my shoulders squared, my posture tall and unflinching, no longer needing the cane I had used as a shield to hide my strength. You stopped being my family the day you buried my father in secret and sold my sacrifice for designer dresses, I said softly, my voice carrying the quiet, unshakable weight of a soldier who had finally reclaimed her life. You mistook my silence for weakness, but discipline is not weakness. As the marshals marched my mother and sister down the center aisle past 90 glaring donors and flashing press cameras, Staff Sergeant Miller stepped beside me. He didn't offer pity, he offered a crisp, silent nod of absolute respect. Slowly, one by one, every donor, politician, and veteran in the room stood up from their tables, breaking into a thunderous, overwhelming ovation that echoed off the high ceilings, honoring the true officer standing quietly in their midst. I took a deep, clear breath of the cool night air blowing through the open glass doors, feeling the heavy chain of a 6-year lie snap off my chest forever. You cannot fix people who use your loyalty as a weapon against you. For 6 long years, I allowed my family to manipulate my love, believing that my endurance and my quiet silence were proof of my duty to my father. I let them belittle my service, call me a failure, and take my dignity because I believed that keeping the peace was more important than protecting myself. But toxic, greedy people do not see your grace as kindness. They see it as an invitation to take everything you have left. They will steal your honor, exploit your pain, and bury your truth, all while convincing the world that you are the problem. Real peace doesn't come from staying silent to protect abusers. Real peace comes from having the courage to stand firm in the light, drawing an unbreakable line in the sand, and letting the consequences of their own choices bring them down. Never burn yourself out to keep toxic people warm.